Hello and welcome back to the Toffee Blues YouTube channel, your source for all things Everton. My name's Thomas, back with a video that we don't always do on this channel. We've done a couple of times before. Should we sign this player? Joined by Terry McAllister from the Toffee Blues today. A player that, I mean, you could say we know him well. Never really broke into the first team at Everton. Of course, Antonee Robinson, American left back, 23 years old. Came through the Everton Academy, went on a couple of loans, I think one to Bolton, one to Wigan, then eventually signed for Wigan on a permanent deal. I think the fee was somewhere around 2 million. I'm not sure if that was ever confirmed. It might be one of those undisclosed ones. Clearly impressed Wigan enough on his loan spell. Clearly the club maybe weren't interested in him. They didn't really see his development go further. But then January comes along, almost moves to AC Milan in a £10 million move, fails his medical, which prevented him going there. The rumours are now he's available again for 2 million. Obviously, what we sold him for because of Wigan's relegation, something like a relegation clause. Say with Joe Williams, I think it is. The club didn't seem like they were in for him. It very much seemed like Sheffield United were going to sign him. Reports then emerged last night. Sources like Alan Myers, come from Sky Sports, that Everton and Fulham are now in for him. I think it made a lot of sense that we were in for him. It might be a lazy link. I mean, we can't really be certain, but we're here to kind of discuss how he'd really fit into the squad if he does join. The value for money. Again, 2 million is not a lot in this market. I think we'll happily say now we haven't watched him loads since he's dropped down to the Championship. It's not really going to be a player analysis, more where does he fit in the squad? Is there a need for a left back kind of? And also we might talk about the under-23 setup. You don't see many of our players kind of just getting sold. Most of them either get released or, loaned until the end of their contract. This was pretty much an anomaly as far as players go that come out of the under-23s. But starting off, do you see the need for a left back now? Obviously, with Baines' retirement, is a left back, do you think, a necessity in this window?
I think it's a necessity, 1000%. Yeah, I mean, if you think back to the much beloved 17-18 season where Baines got injured and we had to play Cuco Martina at left back for a long spell. If you can help it, you shouldn't leave yourself exposed in any position. I understand the arguments of Fabian Delph can play there, or Luca Dean's the first choice, he never gets injured. This is nightmare stuff for me to hear. If one injury to Luca Dean, and let's have it right as well, Luca Dean is a full-blooded player. He goes into tackles with everything, so he could get injured at any time. It's not like I know he hasn't got an injury record, but anything there's lots of players that have injury records who pick up an injury, and then you'd soon wish we brought someone in if that was to happen. Like I know we wouldn't be quite the horror show of Martina at left back, but we could end up with, say it is Fabian Delph, and he's one who's that famous player Fabian Delph who doesn't get injured much himself. You know what I mean? You'd end up with two. I do think we need cover at left back. Yes, if that wasn't clear, whether it should be Antonee Robinson, I don't know, because for a start, I don't think he'll come back. It's not a case of him disliking the club or anything like that, but it would be very foolish on his part because he's left the club, he's dropped down a division, he's raised his profile, he's established himself at Wigan. Obviously, what happens at Wigan happens, and some very unfortunate. But now he can go and get his career going, and he can make his next move is probably the most important move of his career, because his next move needs to work. And he probably wants to be playing every single game, because if he establishes himself at a Premier League club, then he's the international, he's an international and a Premier League player nailed down. What would come back to Everton do for him in his career other than take a big step backwards to be exactly where he was prior to going to Wigan, when he was the second fiddle to Baines, only this time he'd be second fiddle to Dean, who's younger than Baines was when he was there. And okay, Dean could leave at some point, but is he really going to sit around and wait for that? From the club's point of view, it makes perfect sense. The same money we got for him, 2 million, cover at left back, knows the club, has shown out in a different club that he can perform. But I don't know. I don't think it'll happen, and I think we would be probably just as well served getting another Sidibe type loan, because let's be honest, the money we've got, whatever money we have got, is needed for more serious positions. I'd love for the squad to be so healthy and in such good condition that we've had a player retire, so therefore we need a replacement this summer, and that's it really. We we need to just go and replace that player who's retired and might need one other. And then we'd go out and get Jamal Lewis or someone from Norwich, you know, and spend the money, spend 20 million on him or whatever it was that Liverpool wouldn't pay. But we're not in that position. We need, you know, 2 midfielders, centre back, right midfielder, right back. You know, we haven't got money to be throwing on a left back. But so I think a loan could be the best option. Another Sidibe type loan from abroad of a player who's 27, 28, 29. Who comes in and covers for Luca Dean and, you know, will do a job when there's any injuries or suspensions or what have you. I don't think Antonee Robinson will be that. The money would be perfect because you'd spend about 2 million on a loan fee anyway, but I just think we'd end up in a year's time selling him on again. And that might be good for some people. Some people might think that's a good business model, but I just don't think it's realistic. I don't think the player would be well advised to do that, and I don't really believe the link. I think we're probably... we probably look elsewhere before trying to bring, you know, Anthony Jedi back.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I think the club's transfer strategy was definitely altered when Baines retired. By the sounds of it, obviously they offered him a contract. They clearly thought he might stay for a bit. We don't know when he revealed that he was going to retire. Clearly he has. The club obviously signed Niels Nkunku from Marseille. Clearly not ready for first team football. I don't think anyone really expect that anyway. And the club clearly now realise they need backup at left back. I can see the link. I mean, as you said there, it's a deal that makes a lot of sense for the club, but it makes no sense for the player. Sheffield United were the front runners, as I mentioned. Would he start there? I don't even think so. I think the Fulham move would make the most sense. You know, promoted club. They're going to have to recruit. You know, I mean, when they came up last time, they spent plenty of money. Maybe they don't have that kind of money to spend again, and don't want to make the same mistakes as last time. So they're going to look for more value for money, which 2 million definitely is. Clearly a very capable player, USA international. Played well in the Championship, almost earned himself a move to AC Milan, which it almost sounds quite Football Manager-esque. I mean, I couldn't quite believe the links when they came out. But he looks like he looks like a good player. I haven't watched him, but clearly he's impressed in the Championship enough for Premier League clubs to be sniffing around him. If, as you mentioned, for him in his career, it makes absolutely no sense. The club, you know, they've signed this lad from Marseille to maybe be a future left back, and they're clearly looking for a kind of a stopgap. You know, let him develop in the under-23s. Don't have to put him on the bench or risk him. You know, even having to start, as you mentioned, if Dean gets injured. So they're clearly looking for a stopgap, as you mentioned. I think a loan would make a lot more sense for Robinson. Okay, maybe it's, you know, I don't want to say the nostalgia. Maybe he'd feel better coming back to a club that he knows. I don't think that's unlikely. Seems like a determined lad. You know, he left the club, as you mentioned. He wasn't hanging around to see maybe would he break it. He left. He was happy to go down, happy to drop down a level, prove himself, which we don't have too many of our under-23 players doing that. I think they're quite happy to hang around at the club, get a couple of loans, maybe even get a long-term contract if your name's Luke Garbutt, you know, players like that. And obviously, I like the idea that we're signing a backup for 2 million. We shouldn't be spending a lot of money on a backup. It makes no sense when we need that money to actually recruit for the first team. I agree, we definitely need a left back. Yes, Delph can play there, but he's always injured. Also, it's not his natural position. He'll probably want to play central midfield. Obviously, he could do that role, but when's he available? If he's not available to play him in central midfield, he's not available to play at left back. So we definitely need cover.
Playing left back at Man City as well is a lot different than playing left back at Everton. It's a totally different game. And let me put it another way about Robinson. It's like we've just had John Joe Kenny come back from a loan at Schalke, where he was up for Rookie of the Year in the Bundesliga. Obviously, he never won it. But if Robinson had been on loan at Wigan, would we be seeing him and played the way he had? Would we be seeing him more positively than we see John Joe Kenny, who we all think is probably worth selling? Because, you know, you get pure profits and he's not quite good enough to play for Everton, but he's, you know, done well on his loan. I think it'd just be signing a left back, John Joe Kenny, someone who, if we sold Luca Dean next summer, we wouldn't be happy for Robinson to be our new left back. We'd have to replace. We wouldn't be signing a new second choice left back. We'd be looking to sign a new first choice if Dean was to be sold next summer. So I don't see the point in bringing in Robinson when, if Dean is sold, he's not going to step up. He's just going to be second choice. That doesn't mean we sign Dean's replacement now. I mean, that means for me, you sign a loan player now with a view to signing him as, you know, possibly signing him as a long-term, backup, and then when Dean does go, he still stays the backup, whoever that player may be. I always say we need a new Luca Dean at right back. I think now we need a Jibril Sidibe type at left back, someone who comes in and just adds competition and cover, and on a loan, and he's a good age, so he's that. But if Coleman was a retired at the end of this year, no one would have expected us to buy Sidibe. But if we had bought him, we'd have still been looking for someone else as well for him to compete with. So Robinson, for me, I don't think makes a lot of sense. I think it does on the face of it because of his connections with the club and his age and the price. But if you dig down into it, I think it's just a step backwards for club and for player, because he's not going to be any better off than he was. It's not like he's gone somewhere abroad and really been on fire. Like he's done less in his time away from the club than John Joe Kenny has, and we see John Joe Kenny as needing to be upgraded upon. So that's the way I look at it.
Yeah, and kind of, I mean, there's not too much we can talk about. Obviously, it is purely speculation at this point. We don't actually know if we're in for him. I think the money makes a lot of sense to getting the money back that you paid, or paying the money that you sold him for. I mean, from a financial perspective, yes, it makes sense for the club, but we're not really here to talk about that. Kind of just to round off the video, I mean, we've spoken in a lot of depth about our under 23 system, how it doesn't work, it fails players, they kind of go on to do nothing, they get released. This is a very different situation all of a sudden. How do you think this kind of move now might affect the club's under 23 strategy? Obviously, they sold him, they clearly didn't think he had a route to the first team. All of a sudden, they need a left back. They might be linked with him. I mean, we don't know if the under 23 strategy is going to change. We know it has to. Yeah, we know it should change to improve players' prospects. But as we've seen here, as I mentioned before as well, we rarely sell under 23 players. They've now the one or two that we've sold. Now all of a sudden we're trying to sign one back. Potentially, of course, still speculation. Do you think this might kind of signal maybe a change in strategy? Maybe something like a buyback fee, which Barcelona like to put in their players, like with having Deulofeu. Maybe, profit from the next sale, that kind of percentage. I think we might have that in Robinson's contract, but again, are we really going to end up taking money from Wigan, going into administration, going down to League One? It's a tricky situation to be in. But do you think this is going to be a change for the under 23s, or do you think this is just quite an anomaly, really?
Well, I think the change has already happened, but it's not being implemented seriously yet, because the ban for buying players is lifted in a few months. Can't remember exactly when it is, but it's in the next couple of months. Marcel Brands seems to be getting a little bit more hands-on with the under 23s than he had been. I think the sort of class of player from 3 years ago who won the Premier League 2, they're all going to be gone soon. Like Pennington will be gone, Kenny will be gone. All those players. And I think we'll probably approach it in a different way. Like we've signed players to go in the 23s. Like Nkunku's come in. Branthwaite was bought for that. Remember, obviously, twist of fate when we bought him. We didn't imagine that he'd be playing first team by the end of the season, and we didn't think the end of the season would be after June. But if things had gone differently, Branthwaite just be in the under 23s next season with Nkunku in the back four as well. So I think we are looking at a different approach. But put it this way, if he hadn't have failed that medical, it'd have been £10 million from AC Milan, and we'd have got a chunk of that from his sell-on fee. The only reason we're not going to get it now is because, some tomfoolery from the Wigan owner has meant they've gone into administration and relegated. So they've had to sell for less than or equal to what they bought him for, which, let's be honest, no club in the world is going to agree to a buyback sell-on fee if you still take money from them, if you're selling for less than you bought them for. That no club's going to have that. It's going to be, if we spin a profit on this young player, you can get a percentage of that. That's probably how all sell-on fees work. It's just the extreme scenario of this one has worked against us. I think the other 23s are in for a big change. I think that's eventually where Brands will do his most long-lasting work. Whatever you think of him in his first team recruitment, I think the under 23s and the youth side of the football club is where he's going to have his hands in the deepest, and it's where it needs it the deepest as well, because you touched on it before. We shouldn't be having players get released at the end of the contract. We're bringing players in from other clubs, having them in the under 23s for 4 years or something, and then they get released and we don't make any profit on them. I want them to come through, and I want them to have a clear development path. And if 9 out of 10 of them end up getting sold for small profits into the Football League or abroad, it's fine. It's a conveyor belt. Chelsea do that at a higher level, where into European clubs. I wouldn't mind us having a version of that ourselves, even if it's at realistically a much lower sort of scale. Or we bring in a player for $1 million, and then we flip him and we sell him for 3.5-4 million in 2 years if he doesn't make it into the first team, and then 9 times out of 10 do that. But if that one out of the extra one goes into the first team, be ideal. You just want to stop having 9 out of 10 players being released and then the other one gets sold for probably less than you brought them in for, because there's players in the under 23s who have been bought for 5-6 million from other clubs.
Yeah, and I agree. Obviously, we've gone into a lot of detail on the under 23s in the past, so I don't want to dwell on it for too long. But I mean, I completely agree with everything you said there. The club shouldn't be releasing. I mean, I think now that class of whenever they first won the Premier League 2 or whatever it's called, they should now all just be moved on. I mean, you look at Lewis Gibson, potentially he'll be staying around. I'm not sure if the club even know what their strategy is for him now with Branthwaite breaking in as well. I'm sure they didn't really envisage that. As we mentioned before, Gibson probably would have been the Branthwaite if he wasn't on loan at Fleetwood, to be fair. He would have been picked ahead of him. But I think that group needs to be moved on. Obviously, a few of them have already been released, players like Fold, players like Morgan Feeney. And I think then Brands might view it as a clean slate. It's then his under 23s. It's not one he's inherited, full of 24-year-olds, 25-year-olds, even 27-year-olds. I mean, how old's Matthew Penton these days? He's like 26 or something, isn't he? I mean, he's been around for quite a while. And is he on loan, or I'm actually not sure what he's even doing these days?
Yeah, he's coming back now, obviously, but he was on loan at Hull. But he's I said this in the season, like Garbutt's older than Dean and Pennington's older than Mina. It's just ridiculous. Like,
it's the most Everton stat.
He'll go as well. He's got 1 year left on his deal. I think he'll end up going. They'll all go. Every one of that, old guard, that dad's army of the under 23s, they're all going to go. One way or the other, whether they're out on loan for the last of this contract. And I think once this season's done, we'll have a lot of, we'll have another wave of releases next summer from possibly Theo Walcott on down, players like that, Sigurdsson, and then you'll probably stop seeing that then, because we'll be clear on the books of the Steve Walsh and Ronald Koeman signings on the FFP front. That that 3-year cycle from them will have finished. And all the players who are old and on contracts, they all seem to be up then. So after that, you'll stop seeing so many players being released. But I think the reality has bitten the hierarchy of the club, Marcel Brands, and probably above him as well, that, it's not as easy, even before the pandemic, to sell a lot of these players. So we are just going to have to end up waiting for Sandro's deal to expire and just have them loaned out until that is, and then just learn the lesson. Don't sign players who you can't shift on.
Yeah, and I think, I agree. I think this is pretty much it for that group of under 23s, which Robinson was technically a part of, and obviously he was moved on. Players like Joe Williams was moved on. Kieran Dowell's obviously just gone to Norwich. We don't know how much that was for, but obviously an academy prospect sold for money. It's always going to look good on the books. It makes a lot of sense. And I think kind of that is it for that group. It's, if you're not sold, you're released. And then, as I said, Marcel Brands will then mould the under 23s into whatever he wants them to mould it into. And you'll have the the development plan in his head. I mean, as you mentioned, Chelsea have a perfect model of how to do it. They either sell the players for profit to Europe, they put them on loans for loan fees, they get money from them every year. It makes a lot of sense. People criticise Chelsea for stockpiling players, but I mean, I wouldn't see that criticism here. As you mentioned, it's going to be on a much smaller scale. It's not going to be anywhere near that. So I think, obviously, this is still the Antonee Robinson video. We have kind of sidetracked it in the under 23s, but I don't think we should go in for him. No, I want to rephrase that. I think we should go in for him because it makes sense. I don't think he will come back, and I'm not even sure we're in for him, though. It is probably quite an easy link to make if you are a journalist. But I think what he represents is, where the under 23s should be. That you sold a player for $2 million to the Championship. He almost moved to AC Milan. You would have earned money from him. Perfect deal for everyone involved. And that should be the system for pretty much every player coming through now. But that's pretty much it from the Antonee Robinson video. be sure to let us know in the comments what you think about him. Should we be signing him? Does the deal make sense to you? Do you think the player will come? Obviously, all the questions we've discussed, do let us know what you think about that in the comments. Thank you to Terry for joining me. As always, thank you all very much for watching. Check out all the other videos on the channel at the moment. AFC 24/7 videos, player reviews, plenty of content going up, before the season starts again. And obviously we'll have our usual kind of match preview, match analysis coming up now. Everton have announced their new pre-season fixtures, which will be starting next weekend from recording now. So those type of videos will be coming back alongside all the transfer rumours as well. So check out Terry's social media, mine, all the Toffee Blues. Thank you very much for watching, and join us next time on the Toffee Blues.